Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone. Hi everyone. Happy Thursday. I watched practice yesterday, Callow, without Marshon Lattimore. Look at us. Look at us.
You not only did that, you watched practice outside because
I
last week was
did.
the bubble.
I
So,
also, God, did I get made fun of yesterday? I had on jeans and a black shirt and a black hat, and it was, for the first time, 91 degrees outside. There was not a single person that didn't walk by me that was like, what's wrong with you? you you don't know how to dress. And I'm like, well, it's actually been, and I'm of course defending myself. Like, it's actually been quite mild, so far this summer. So I don't know what you guys are talking about. you know, anyway, whatever.
I've known you for a while. That's like your normal look. That's
It's kind of my
like
look. Yeah.
you don't wear shorts. Like we've had this
No,
discussion before. You don't wear shorts.
never,
Um,
never. I will wear bathing suit to the pool or beach. That's the closest thing you'll get to me in shorts. I don't wear shorts. I'm out.
right. And I know you always wear like a black graphic tee or just a plain black shirt like you're
That's
wearing
right.
now. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's not far off from me.
Yeah, this one's like off green. This is me stepping out of myself a little bit to put on something that's not black. Right.
You pay your big bucks to your stylist for that one?
Yeah, I got all over that one. Yeah. She's probably like, haven't heard from you in a while. And I'm like, have you looked? Watch me on YouTube. Not much has changed.
Right.
You didn't change my habits. All right, I mentioned him, but let's talk about it. Let's get to the news of OTA 2, which again qualified. This is all voluntary. Next week is not. Next week is the mini camp. That's mandatory. You got to show up and be part of that. I assume that Marshon Lattimore is going to show up and be part of that. But he was not part of this. Neither was Larry Tunsil. Neither was Terry McLaurin. But I'm not litigating those two other cases because I think I know what those are. This one is a touch different. And we got the first shade of it. Like when Joe Witt who did his press conference of the offseason, first time we talked to him, and we asked him about him. And what he said was he hasn't been here, and we'll see what kind of condition he's in when he shows up, which was the closest thing that they do to shading a player because they typically kind of don't. And honestly, in the last year plus, they haven't had to. If you really think about it, there's not many cases where they've had to do it. Like, remember when Jack went after Jayden Davis a little bit or went after other players a little bit?
The DBs.
They kind of had to go after play. Like at some point, someone had to draw a line, and maybe we didn't like how it was done or whatever, but they had to do it. Think about like from the get-go of this to now, they haven't really had to do that because everything's gone so swimmingly. This is the first time I've heard any coach kind of go, yeah, I don't know, man. He's not here. So I'll let you know what he looks like when he shows up, presumably next week, which was very telling. It was the first time I heard somebody do something like that. And it confirmed it isn't that he isn't just here now. He hadn't been here at all throughout this voluntary portion.
I will. I would say this too. Remember when Jack Del Rio called out the DBs because their communication was bad? So he was like, "Oh, well, they weren't here in OTAs," and I was like, "Oh boy, here we go on that one." But I will say this with Joe Witt. I kind of, when I listened to it yesterday during my show, I will say Joe Witt is a no nonsense coach. So when he says something like that, I think there's like it's worth saying in his context that like he kind of does the he's not here, so I don't really want to talk about him type mode a little bit. And so that's what I felt it was. I didn't think it was more shade at Marshon. I think it was just more like, I don't have an answer because he hasn't been here. More so than like shading him a little bit. And look, I think he even said like, he's a smart young player. We'll see what, shape he is in on the other side here. I didn't really look at it as much as shade as just as much Joe Witt does not play games like this. And he pretty much was just doing I haven't seen him, so we'll see. I'll know when you know, essentially.
I would have liked, again, I really would, because I don't ask the questions in these things. It's not my place to ask questions. I stay away from I do it every once in a while, but very rarely now. I used to when I was in the journalistic role of, being around the team. I used to, but now I just go and watch and monitor and listen. And because just for the purposes of calling the games, and it's just not my place to ask a lot of questions. But I do really wish that someone asked Dan Quinn about that. Because now we finally heard someone say he hasn't been here basically at all throughout any of this stuff. What do you think of that? And I would have liked to hear what he had to say. and he's very good at handling all this stuff. But it is, again, one of the first times that I think we're all kind of side-eyed looking at something going, I don't know, man. Like, he was hurt when they acquired him, but that's not his fault. They knew that when they got him. He tried to play through some of it. It didn't go particularly well, to a point where it's like one thing like, oh man, he shouldn't be out there because his legs, whatever. But he's like, got into a fight with AJ Brown, got a bunch of penalties in a couple of games. Like, it wasn't good, you know, and it was things that like can't continue. And so I think that's where I came from, where I'm like, I really just want to know more about what's going on here. And I think we got it, and we didn't get a quick answer on it. And I'm assuming he's going to be here next week. And let's see if he does interviews with anybody, because he doesn't like doing those. Like, he really, really, really doesn't like doing those. So maybe this will just be semi-mysterious for a little bit longer. But I did feel like there was a little bit of, I don't know where he is, so I don't know what to tell you about it. And there was a tinge of like, everybody else is here. It was a tinge of that from him yesterday.
Well, and I think with this group more than anything, I will say more in years past, it has been about a buy-in. And you've called it Club DQ, essentially. That, like, this is actually a little bit more than just about showing up. It's about everyone pulling on the same rope with the same type of effort. And that's why
this is surprising, because it wouldn't be almost anywhere else. But because of the last year, and because of the way this team talks about how they almost like feel like they have to be together, and it's part hard work, part summer camp, part kumbaya, it's actually semi-surprising that anybody wouldn't be here, because they haven't been. But he's also the newcomer of the whole thing.
Right. I mean, but here's the thing, too, though. Like, if we're going to give that energy to Lattimore, I feel like you need to give it to Tunsil a little bit, too. Like, here's the guy that hasn't been here at all.
Agreed.
Like, Lattimore showed up. You know, Lattimore played last year. I shouldn't say showed up, but played last year and at least knows the building. Tunsil hasn't shown up yet, you know, to a on-field activity. He's been in the building, obviously. But, like, he hasn't been there either. And that's why, once again, you do have to go back all the way back to these are voluntary, but you'd like to see everyone in the building, especially when, you know, the three that are missing are Terry, who we know why he's not there, because he wants that new contract. And those two, when you think about it, those are two of the bigger acquisitions that Adam Peters has gotten in his 2 years here. Like, you could argue Lattimore was the biggest acquisition last year, really, when you think about it, outside of like Jayden. But, you know, that was a home run type.
Yeah, Luvu.
Right, but I was thinking like home run type trade, right? They needed a corner. They got one midseason, got him at the deadline. Tunsil, argue the same thing, right? Like, you could argue with Debo if you want, which one's more important or which one's bigger, but I'd argue Tunsil's more important than Debo Samuel at this point. So you almost think about it, the two biggest moves that Peters has made, they're not here. And that's, you know, you got to raise the red flag a little bit here, because once again, context matters. It's all voluntary. They don't have to.
It is all voluntary. It's not like he's doing anything wrong.
Right.
I hate
he's not on a boat pulling out pink, you know, sugar or whatever.
Thank God. Yeah.
Right. So,
thank God. Right. When you think about it that way, it could be a lot worse.
Right.
He's not on a boat pulling out bags of unknown substances. So it could be a lot worse. Right.
Yeah. But so that context, Diggs showed up this week. So at the same time, he did show up to practice.
You know, I think sometimes timing matters. Like, I don't think it's like a coincidence that yesterday, with the on-field thing going on, Laramie Tunsil posts these crazy workout videos to probably quell a little bit of he's not over there like getting fat, is he?
Right.
I think there was like a little bit, like there's always a little bit of that. Like, Debo did the same thing this offseason. He's like, stop telling me I'm Luka Doncic and I'm fat. Like, here's what I'm doing, and started doing this stuff. And I did find it was more than a coincidence that Tunsil posted a video yesterday, like, of him working out. I think it was just a shot to, don't talk about me for a couple of days that I wasn't there. I am doing what I'm supposed to do. And, you know, he's a touch different. I think they're both in the same boat. We don't know either one of them very well, but he's a little bit different. He's not coming off an injury season. He's coming off what is a typical season for him, albeit with a lot of false start penalties. If you want to have some big knock on him, there was that. But it's assuming nothing much has changed with him, we know what we're getting. Like, we know it. The Lattimore thing, I think, stands out because of the injuries last year, and we don't know what we're getting. And because he's not here, it's the unknown of all of that. Like, I believe Tunsil will be in great shape. I believe he'll be fine when he shows up. I would prefer him to be here. But with Lattimore, I don't know what kind of condition he's in. And I think that's the part that's the unknown about it that I think makes it stand out a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I mean, but the difference, though, with at least Tunsil is I know he's a future Hall of Famer. Like, I know that him being away isn't a little bit as much of an unknown as Lattimore is right now, especially once again, I think it matters what happened last year. Lattimore was a mixed bag, to say the best, honestly, and then blew up in their most important game of the year, right? Like, so much so, they had to pull him off of A.J. Brown and put Mikey on him for the second half. Like, he also left last season with a giant question mark of whether we trust this guy or not, and they didn't give up nothing to get him either. So it's also, once again, Lattimore's all these layers, because as you mentioned yesterday, we laid out, it could be maybe he's a little banged up. Maybe it's the contract. Maybe he doesn't like it here. Or it's all of those things. Tunsil, I'm not worried about. Did the presser. Yeah. Said he can't wait to play with Jayden Daniels. Is, like I said, a future Hall of Famer and was good last year. Just had some false start things, whatever. Like, the questions that we're asking about Lattimore are completely different than
100%. That's why it stands out, and that's why I don't think people are making such a big deal about Tunsil. Yeah. Because I think they know what they're getting with him, or they assume they know what they're getting with him. He did say all the right things. This actually isn't out of character. And then yesterday, oh, look, poof, here's a workout video that could have been taken 3 years ago for all I know, but like it presumably occurred a week ago, just to say to you, listen, man, I am taking this seriously. Like, and similarly, his contract is running out of time too, so he'll be motivated. One of the other ones that was brought up yesterday, Joe went out of his way to pump up Daron Payne and the offseason that he's had. I've talked about this a lot with a lot of players. There is nothing like a contract year, like absolutely nothing more motivating, especially I think at this stage of someone's career, like a contract year. And Daron Payne is heading into that, not unlike where John was a year ago, where after this season, there's going to have to be a choice made on Daron Payne because he's got a big number, and they'll make a choice about what's happening with him moving forward. They went out of their way to talk about this. And so, like, immediately, I kind of jumped in my mind to, he knows it's a contract year. He knows he has to have a big year, whether it's here or somewhere else. Yep. He knows he has to have a big year. They need him to have a big year because, like, I love the promise of Kinlaw too, but his career has not been consistent yet. So hopefully it will start to be, and it'll live up to what they said he's going to be. You haven't seen the best of him. And hopefully they're right about that. With Payne, I have seen the best of him. I know what he can be. He hasn't been that since his last contract year. So I'm not surprised this is happening. But then I was talking to someone, and this is someone not directly connected to the team, and they said something, and it actually resonated with me, that throughout his entire career here, Daron has been John and Daron. Not Daron, John and Daron. And it's always been capital J, John and Daron. And this is not an indictment of John, but John not being in the room any longer may have opened up the room for Daron to, I don't know, speak up a little bit more, maybe take a little more of a leadership role. Like, it's not an indictment of John. It's just saying now that he's not here, there's a void for people that have to take over. And he's a logical person, especially in that room, to take over. They've got a lot of veterans on that group, but none of them that stand out as Aaron Donald, who's the de facto, he's great. Like, Bobby Wagner shows up here. Bobby Wagner's going to be a Hall of Famer. Bobby Wagner talks, you listen to him. In the group of the defensive line, Dietrich Wise is very good. Kinlaw, you hope, is going to be a really great player. That's the hope. Dorrance Armstrong's very good. Daron has now the opportunity, and he's not a big talker, but he has the opportunity to stand up and kind of be the leader, de facto leader of this group. And so when someone said that to me, I go, you know what? Like, not that it's like a relief or, God, I'm glad John's good. Nothing like that. Just like for him, the skies opened up a little bit because it's no longer John and Daron. It's just Daron. And I wonder, and I'd like to talk to him about it. I wonder if there's a little bit with being respectful to John. Nobody's trying to say like John stifled anybody. it's just the reality of we're asking you to be a leader now because the other guy's not here any longer. And you were always not in his shadow, but you were always the sidekick. And it was never Daron and John. It was always John and Daron. So, I wonder if there's a little bit of truth to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is the most important thing that you pointed out first. It's another contract year for him. He knows what's coming here. And we saw it that year that he was going to be up for the contract. That was the best version of Daron we ever saw. I point to, and I talked about it on my show yesterday, that one drive against the Broncos. Remember, he single-handedly stopped a drive.
Yeah, he had a hat trick. Yeah,
he had a batted pass, a sack, and a tackle for loss. And not that you need that every play, but I remember going, where's this guy been for 4 years, essentially, where you don't need to see it every play. You don't need to see it every drive, but you need to see the flash every once in a while. And he flashed a lot that year. So I think that's number one here is I think he realizes what's about to happen, too, because he saw what happened with John last year. They have the outs. You can cut them. That basically always happens now in the NFL.
Yeah, either way, if you don't have a big year, your value goes down.
Right.
Either way.
Exactly.
Whether you want to be here or not, you are motivated to have a big year because this will be for him his last big contract, one way or the other, whether it's here or somewhere else.
Exactly. So that is number one overarching. And number two, I've got to piggyback off what you said yesterday too when I listened to the praise, because yesterday seemed to be the hey, how are you guys gonna figure this D-line thing out? And that was him. That was one of those names. And what I think happened here too is, as you're kind of in the same lane as I am here, where it's always been John and Daron. But even last year, I remember kind of thinking when John was doing the rah-rah speeches, before the games, when he was out there, don't get me wrong. I know he was banged up and then he came back. Even I was kind of like, man, I feel like we have a changing of the guard situation here. Is he the right guy to keep on doing this? And I get it. Team captain, been here the longest when outside of Tressway, been here the longest. I just remember kind of thinking last year, do we want Frankie Louvu to start doing this? Do we want Wagner to start doing this? Do we want Jayden to start doing this? And I just remember kind of thinking, I feel like it's getting a little long here. And now with him leaving, I'm with you. Sometimes that just opens up kind of a lane for someone to go, you know what? I am going to step up. I am going to be that person. I don't think Payne's going to be the rah-rah guy by any means. Don't get me wrong on that. But I do think maybe he's thinking, hey, without this guy in the room now, I can kind of be myself maybe a little bit more. Or I know the spotlight's also going to be on me a little bit more, because I do think there's been a little bit of a, hey, we have Daron and John, and you could point the fingers at each other and no one really gets the blame because they're just not as good as a unit. Now, all of a sudden, it's going to be, if you're not good, everyone kind of knows it's on you, not on both of you.
Yes, things have shifted here. The anointed just leadership part of it, I think, is being seized by people and not necessarily handed to people.
Yes.
Granted, I mean, listen, when you are a first-round pick, you are expected to be one of the team's better players. And for a number of years, John was, and so was Daron. The last few, I think part of the hard part with John was the output and the effect on games wasn't there any longer. Yeah. So when you that's where I think what you're talking about kind of lost its weight. If you're going to be the guy who is the Pro Bowl player who is making all these crazy plays, well, it's easy to stand up there and go, listen to me, right?
Right.
And you don't need to be me, but listen to me. And it's not happening really with either one of them. It hadn't been happening. So I felt like you did too. Not that I would speak on what the team chemistry is and who the leadership structure is and all that stuff, because I don't know. I'm not in the locker room, but it did feel like it had lost some of its weight, especially with all of the changes that had come around, because they were amidst this group of first-round picks. The defensive line was the leadership group of the team, or was placed that way because 4 straight first-round picks, all defensive linemen. This is the unit that's supposed to carry this team back to a golden era. Obviously, it never happened. There's only one of them left now that's here. And the others are all trying to figure out their careers at this point. Sweat got paid, but he's not I had a question from a Bears person going he only had 5-something sacks. What's that about? And I'm like, well, that's a little low, but it's really not actually out of care. If you watched his career, he never had numbers. He was always a presence. He never really had numbers. Chase, unfortunately, had all the injuries. And and I think he had some work ethic issues that he needed to deal with, but he had the injuries really more than anything. I was actually pleasantly surprised to see him kind of turn the corner. I wasn't sure if he was going to play again. So I'm like rooting for him. It was nice to see him look like himself again. And John, we'll see what happens in Minnesota. It's a very good spot, I think, for him on a very good defense, but he is not going to walk in there and be the leader of that team at all. So that'll be actually very interesting to see what happens when he gets into a role where he takes kind of a back, not a front-facing role with a team. He's not going to get all the attention there, and they're not going to ask him to walk in and be a leader. They're not asking him to put them over the top. They're asking him just to be a good player on a good defense. That'll be interesting to see. For Daron, the skies have opened up here a little bit. Now, he's not that vocal of a person. Maybe he's a little bit more in the room than he is with us, but he's always been very friendly with us and always been talkative, but he doesn't have much to say. And I think he is going to be the typical lead by example person. And I think that's what Witt was trying to say, that by example, he's been great this year. I always feel like the great motivator is the money. And I'm not blaming anybody for that. It's this reality of things will motivate you, and a contract will if a contract doesn't motivate you, then you don't really want to play that much longer any long. You know what I mean? You've got to prove yourself to get to that point. But I do think there's an opening here. And the reality is for them to do the things that they're talking about, which Witt said this, and I thought it was like the biggest takeaway line of the whole thing, which he said, our pass rush and our run D will be better. It starts and ends with people like Payne being the player they were a few years ago, because we keep looking at this group and we're going, I don't know, where are they going to get the pass rush from? Where's this all coming from? But if Payne's going to be that guy 3 years ago and Kinlaw is going to be the guy they say he's going to be, well, then they are good up front. It's just we haven't seen either one of those things happen in a while. And that's why everyone's going, are you going to get the results you think you're going to get?
Well, and I think I forget if it was him or Dan Quinn. They used the word versatility. They said they liked the versatility of their linemen, which tells me too, they had some guys last year where maybe they were one-dimensional. And you know what? Fowler comes to mind on that one, right?
Yes.
Where you and I talked through.
You can't move him inside. But he's a traditional outside rusher is what he is. Yeah.
Right, but it was also you need to get him off the field when it's a clear running down, right? That was the whole point with him as well, was he had all these sacks because you had to put him out there on 3rd and long, right? And you had to put him out there when you knew it was going to be a passing down. What it all tells me too is you connect the dots here. What happened a couple years ago? They were moving Payne to the outside, right?
Yeah.
And so, I was kind of thinking, okay, maybe this is what their thinking is going to be. And granted, I don't know what their thinking was this early in the offseason, but I remember Payne was on the outside a little bit. He was effective on the outside a little bit. I seemed to wake him up a little bit. It excited him a little bit is the word I guess I would use. And so this just seems to kind of go with the company line of they like the unit. They're just going to have to figure it out with these guys and where they slot in and when, I think is important too.
When they got Kinlaw and when they didn't go after a big edge rusher and when they let Fowler go, the first thing that I was saying was what it looks like to me, is this is going to be a hybrid group, that they're going to move people around. Wise coming in can play on the outside. It's where he typically is. He can move on the inside. Witt more than hinted that Kinlaw could move a little bit more on the outside, which I think that's an interesting matchup outside because of his size. The left tackle doesn't typically see somebody that big in front of them. But is he good at rushing and doing what he needs to do from that position, or does he become a liability? I don't know. But this is where I landed on the group. If they didn't go get Trey Hendrickson, or they didn't go get, and I still think it's very possible because there are big name edge rushers that are available to them. Zadarius Smith, Von Miller, Jadeveon Clowney. They haven't signed with anybody yet. So there are possibilities of people that could come in here, and I keep feeling like they're going to do that. But listening to him yesterday where he was just saying, our pass rush will be better, our run D will be better, and we're going to get all of that production back that we lost from Fowler in those numbers in various ways, maybe not with one person, but through various people. I actually thought Witt was very, very open about what they're doing. This is the great experiment that they're doing this year, because if they don't go get an edge rusher, I think they will, but if they don't and they go in with this group, because it's very deep with a lot of veterans, but seems to be missing a clear role player who gets a lot of sacks or disrupts plays or is a specialist, however you want to call it. If they don't go get this, they're basically saying, we think we're good with this group. You may not think we're good, but we think we're good. I've seen this a million times. We're going to find out who's right or who's wrong here about this, because they're going to, I think, have to be very creative about all these different players up there and move them around a little bit and try to get production. And when you experiment a lot, it can go either way. It could be genius. It can work. It could flummox the other team. Or you got guys playing a little out of position. They're not necessarily comfortable in doing this, and it could burn you. So I actually think like this is the great experiment and the great risk if they don't bring a pass rusher in here by training camp.
Well, and then the other follow-up, I think it was Nikki that asked Joe Witt Jr., and she actually, I think, was barking up the right tree of, oh, well, you have these D linemen that, you are trying to move around, and you say that they're versatile. Are you going to try to rush Frankie Louvu a little bit more than maybe you did last year? And I think maybe once again, this seems to be a by committee thing that maybe you're bringing the linebackers up a little bit more. Quan Martin was talked about yesterday too a lot more. So the way I feel is that I think they're not only going to this by the units, I think they're also going to try to, fold in some guys from the other units as well. That's really what it sounds like to me.
Yes. But I will say this, okay, because this is a team that wants you to know and that they believe they're in a championship window right now.
Sure.
And so what I would just say back to that is I've yet to remember a championship window team that didn't have a pure pass rusher on it.
True.
Not one, right? Somebody. It doesn't have to be the great one. It doesn't have to be Max Crosby, but they've got somebody who does that. And this team, until proven otherwise, does not have somebody who does that, which is why I keep feeling like someone else is coming in here. But listening to them yesterday, and maybe they're supposed to take this position, we're comfortable with who we have. This is who we have. We think we can be creative with them. You can't not argue that our line is very deep. It is. It's extremely deep. There's going to be a couple of veterans that get cut here that will be somewhat of a surprise because there's just not room for everybody. So they have a really deep group to work with, but they don't have the guy who wins all the time and the specialist. And I guess if Kinlaw surprises us and moves outside a little bit, or Payne moves outside a little bit, or they figure out a way to be really creative with Louvu, they can get all of that production back. But will it be better than what it was? And will it open up new liabilities? I don't know. This is the great risk of a team that outwardly is saying to you, we think we can win a championship. If they don't have this person, but believe it's already in the building and you'll see, which is what they were kind of saying yesterday, you'll see we're going to be better. I'll buy it on the run defense just off of the personnel. Will it be on the pass defense? TBD. That's the way I feel about that one. And I'm not sitting here saying it won't happen. I'm not a coach on the team, and that's their job to make this happen. But that's what they're selling me, and that's the one that I go, I need to see it to believe it.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the other side of this too. And we are privy to believe what they say until they're wrong, right? And they've been right about just about everything since they've gotten here. I'm not questioning
this coaching staff off of what they did a year ago.
Right.
I'm just telling you, this is where my concern is, but they answered every question I could have possibly had a year ago.
No, exactly. Like, I still go back to that press conference after the preseason where Dan Quinn and Adam Peters came out and were like, we want to compete right now. And I was like, oh my, like, you guys really want to play this game when we didn't really have high expectations for you? Lo and behold, they go and win 12 games. So, like, I am privy to believe them way more than any other coaching staff that's been here in my lifetime, essentially. So I'll believe it when I see it. And, it's one of those things. I always say this. When you say stuff like this, I don't have to react to it super strongly right away, but I do have to, you said this on June 5th or whatever the date is and put it on a shelf. And then if the D-line falls in week 2 against Green Bay, I get to pull it off the shelf, essentially.
That's right. Hallmark of a good coaching staff, too, is people develop and get better.
True.
So in that vein, is Johnny Newton going to be better this year? Maybe. Like, he seems to be forgotten in this discussion. He might be a movable part for them. We don't really know. The other ones are these, which all came up, and Joe Witt addressed each one of them. Jordan McGee, 1. They had a package for him. He was going to play a year ago. He got injured in training camp, kept getting injured, so it just got kind of thrown out the window. But he admitted, and this is rare for them and rare to say anything like this, they will use 3 linebacker sets this year. So they are going to be creative. And McGee is clearly going to be part of that. So he's got a big future here to see what he can do as long as he can stay healthy. Kane Medrano who's the rookie out of UCLA. He's undersized, in my opinion. The way that Witt put it, but he can really run. And the way that Witt put it was kind of like, and he screams special teamer to me, but he kind of put it like, is he a safety? Is he a small linebacker? We're not totally sure, which always reads to me, he's not going to have a big role here unless there's injuries, and they may slip him in on special teams, or it may take a little while to figure it out. But just physically, if you look at him, you go, that guy is not going to handle being a in-the-box linebacker. Like, I just don't think he's got the body size for it. Owens was interesting, too. They basically said, or Witt basically said, we're still figuring him out, that we're not sure exactly what he is. Now, I look at him and I go, that guy could be a physical presence. But similarly, they're like, is he the Buffalo nickel? Is he a safety? Is he, a spot linebacker the way Chin could be? We're not totally sure, but this is someone who I think they're trying to figure out and see where he fits and try to find a role for him too.
No, I mean, these are the types of names too that like they get brought in and you kind of forget about them too, because they're not one of the first or second round picks. Or in McGee's case, we heard about him a lot last year, was banged up. The most I heard about McGee was reading him on the injury report every week, right? Yeah. Like he was always on.
They loved him when they drafted him. They went on and on and on about him. And so I'm not surprised that they're back on the train of let's see what year 2 looks like, because it's just really a redo for him.
Yeah, but especially too, though, like I think the biggest factor here is this defense is basically going to be, if you are one of the best 11 guys, we'll figure out how to get you out there too, right? Like it seems like the name of the game is about to be versatility. Who can be out there and slot in, and who can be a part of the puzzle pieces? Because that's what I think all 3 of those guys, as you just mentioned, 2 of them are quote unquote hybrids. So this is going to be an odd one of just like, I think it's going to be a little chaotic on what we see with this defense is down to down, distance to distance.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let me take a quick break. Bram Watch the Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. One more thing on the Commanders. This is from Kimes' piece that he wrote leading into the OTAs. This is from Cliff Kingsbury's press conference from a week ago, but he basically said on Jayden Daniels, quote, I expect him to take a big jump this year. And everyone has this fear that there's going to be some kind of sophomore slump. Not that it can't happen, and not that their record couldn't take a step back because of who they're playing and what their schedule looks like. But I don't see that right now. I see the work ethic in this player, and I see the dual threat athleticism that's rare. And I just have a hard time buying that it's not, I don't know if get better is the right word for it, but this drop off that people seem to think is going to happen, I kind of don't buy that. This is where when they talked about the whole coaching staff is back, I think it's a big deal. Everybody is back working with him. I think it's a really big deal that that's happening this year. And then there was this quote, which I actually really, really thought was very telling from Kingsbury a week ago. And he said this, you look traditionally through the NFL, the guys who've had a ton of success have been able to stay in those long term, just the comfort level, and then being able to take ownership of it and understand it inside and out, where now you're correcting people, but you don't even really need the coaches. And he's kind of getting to that point. That's quite a quote for someone who's in his second year, for Kingsbury, who's been around the block a million times with great quarterback after great quarterback, not good ones, great quarterback after great quarterback after great quarterback. For him to just outwardly say in year 2, he is getting to the point where I can step back and let him do the coaching of everybody else. If that's really accurate, then he's not going to have a sophomore slump. He is just going to get better, which has been my default when I do interviews with anybody out of town this year. When they ask me about him and they say the sophomore slump, I go, have you considered what happens if he gets better? Because if he does, forget it. Like, we're going to be the team that you're chasing every single year if that's what it's going to be.
No, I mean, look, when we could see it last year, how much better he was getting, how much command, no pun intended, that he had on this offense. I'm not surprised. Like, I will once again, I'm going to reference this for the rest of my life. When we looked at the quarterbacks that were available last year in the draft, the top three, right, between Caleb, Jayden, and Drake May, what kept coming up with Jayden? How he just kept improving year after year. And it wasn't just like a small jump. It was he kept getting exponentially better, all the way up to getting a Heisman with LSU. I just remember thinking, this guy doesn't seem like he's going to lose the motivation here. It seems like the guy is a computer where he's just like, okay, this is what I'm doing now, and now I'm going to improve. And I think there's something to be said about when you're in the draft process. You've seen this enough in covering football for years and years. Think about what he had to do last year as you're going through this draft process. You don't really get to practice. You have to visit all these teams. You're on planes every single day. You finally do get drafted. You can start getting down to work. Well, guess what's happened now? This whole offseason, he's had a playbook in front of him that in an offense that he's already run. He's doing the VR stuff, right? This guy wants to get better. I've never had any kind of worry about this. And I'm kind of not surprised this is the case, that he is going to demand that from his teammates. And look, here's the thing, too. That's what the great ones do. Like, what famously, did Tom Brady do? He would scream at his teammates when they would be out of position or run the wrong route or whatever. The great ones do that. Patrick Mahomes gets pissed off at his wide receivers all the time at this type of stuff. I'm not surprised we're going into this territory already. Yeah, year 2, it's kind of shocking, but I feel like if you've watched them like we have, this isn't like crazy to me.
On the other side of the coin, was this happen? Mike McDonald, the Seahawks coach, went on a sports radio show up in Seattle. I guess Sam Darnold hasn't looked great in whatever their on-field stuff is. I guess he has. I don't know, because that's why this question would come up. Like, because I guess he just hasn't looked great. It's so early though, and I guess he hasn't looked great. And they did draft Jalen Milroe, right? But it was in the third round, So the potential, quarterback of the future is there. In Milroe's case, the athleticism's really there. I didn't really see it in college, but he does have high-end athleticism. So I'm not saying he can't happen. I just would be surprised. But he was asked the question, could you see Darnold getting benched if it's going to be bad, which is a really bad sign to start the season. If they're asking this now, it's a really bad sign. And he laughed it off and scoffed at them. And it was like, it's a ridiculous, crazy question, which I would just say back to the coach, is it?
Right.
Like I've seen this before. The insolent coach, you better be right. You better be right. There's a better way to soft pedal this. Like, it's June, guys. Like, we don't expect him to be perfect. And he's our guy. It's going to be great. And we're not even thinking about something like that. But to turn around and go, you guys are nuts. You don't see it right, is a bad path to go down. Trust me. You better win and you better be right, because if you don't, people will come at you constantly.
This is shades of Ron with Carson Wentz.
Guys. Yeah.
Right. This is shades of that.
We need Scott up there to ask a few questions.
And remember, I remember the funniest part about that offseason was, remember Heineke did a presser and they asked him about, one of you guys asked him about starting or whatever. And he's like, I don't know. Do you see what that guy's salary is? Like, that's really what it comes down to.
He goes, he makes $30 million. I make $2 million. Who do you think is going to start?
Yeah, which is like amazing. I love that a player said that. That's one of the reasons I loved Heineke when he was here. But then remember, like, Ron was hesitant to bench Wentz. Luckily, Wentz got a finger injury and they benched him, because of that, after that Bears game or whatever. So it's shades of that. And what I will say is this. There's a thing that happens with the fan base when something major, everyone kind of thinks they can do it. Like, I think one of the detriments to this fan base in Washington for years and years was Joe Gibbs won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. And it's only taken until the last 5 to 10 years for every fan to get on board of, you need to have a franchise quarterback. Yeah. Like, there's a sect of this fan base that's like, remember last year we talked about it. There were actual fans saying, trade down and draft Joe Alt. Like, remember that was the crazy parts of the fan base. But what I'm getting at here is, in Seattle, they watched it happen where they signed Matt Flynn in the offseason, drafted Russell Wilson, and to them, it's not crazy that they acquired a quarterback, signed him to a contract, and drafted one. So I will say, like, that franchise has a slight precedence to ask those questions. That's all. I'll just say that.
Yeah, 100% they do. And, it's interesting. Like when I think about what Joe Gibbs did, this is why I think he's the greatest coach ever, to go to 4 Super Bowls and win 3 of them with 3 different quarterbacks, none of those quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame. That's unbelievable, right? That's truly unbelievable. However, like if you want to be fair about it, I think if Joe Theismann doesn't break his leg, he probably would have been a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Yes.
And Doug Williams probably should be in the Hall of Fame. Like Doug Williams had a tremendous career. He was not some like they plucked him off the street type of player. He was like a top pick who had an incredible career with Tampa Bay, ended up going to Washington, and ended up having a great second act with them. So it's not like he had nobodies playing quarterback for him, but none of them were in the Hall of Fame. And so, like, there's that. All right, one other quick thing in the NFL that I wanted to bring up because he said this. Saquon Barkley said to reporters that one day he might just pull a Barry Sanders, meaning he may surprise you and just retire one day. Like, you may be surprised at the day he retires, to which I would say to him, please do that sooner rather than later. I need you to go away. Or go somewhere else first, because I've had enough of you. And I say that respectfully because I love you and I think you're amazing and you're killing me every single year. Please go away.
I mean, look, we saw it. We didn't really talk about it on the show, but his name's escaping me. The Lions center that just retired.
Ragnow.
Yeah. He was only 7 years into his career, right? Like this isn't new anymore, where guys are retiring 6-7 years in.
Yeah, I mean, at any position, you're making real money now, where you can make, I think, this decision.
Yeah, and what I would say is, like, it wouldn't shock me that Saquon pulls this. What else does Saquon have to really prove too? Like,
not after last year. Yeah.
Well, and like with running backs now, who's a Hall of Fame running back? You know what I mean? Like, I think he's probably already proved that in terms of what these players do 100%. At running back. Like, so he could actually retire in a year or two, and I think you probably put him in the Hall of Fame because running backs don't do this anymore. It's a very short list. And look, I've said this. I love that players now prioritize their health. Ragnow was one of them. Like, I love that Ragnow was just like, I can keep telling myself I'm okay, but I'm not okay, and I need to retire. Like, this has been the trend for a while. Luke Kuechly, was banged up and had to do this too. We saw it years and years ago with I forget, there was a 49ers linebacker that retired. His name is escaping me too, but like, this is happening more and more, and I'm not surprised Saquon brings this up because I will say that, like, he plays the toughest position in the game where you're not getting paid as much. Granted, he is the highest paid one. Wouldn't surprise me at all. I will say this though. Barry Sanders also retired because he was on the Lions and he was the only weapon on that team. So like, that one did wear him down a little bit more, where Saquon is winning, coming off a Super Bowl, and very, very good. I think the circumstances are just a little bit different.
All right, let me take a quick break. Bram watch the show. ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, a couple final thoughts for today. One, I loved that in the primary for the New York City mayoral race, one of the questions of the candidates was, what do you think of the firing of Tom Thibodeau? I thought that was pretty amazing. Tells me how important sports are, how important the Knicks are. Like, to be asked a question like that in a primary, I thought that was pretty good. And I actually think it's very telling. If one of the candidates can't answer that question or doesn't know anything about it or sounds completely off, it actually is kind of one of those things that I think should disqualify you from holding a position like that. Because if you don't know about something that's that important to the people you're trying to govern, as silly as that may sound, I don't know. Like, if Muriel Bowser was in a race for DC mayor and you asked about RFK and what its history meant to the team and the candidates didn't know, wouldn't that, like, I don't know, say something about them that they don't know the community that well, right?
No, I've said this before. Like, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. When politicians are involved in knowing about their sports teams, like, I'm not trying to say get involved in terms of putting their hands on it, but knowing their sports teams, I always feel like we're all better off. Like, I joked about this. In Donald Trump's first term, he didn't talk about anything with sports. He would bring out the fast food for the championship teams, but that was about all we got, right?
Yeah.
But then when Biden came in, Biden's a diehard Eagles fan. His wife loves the Phillies. They talked about sports a little bit more. And it wasn't crazy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say he was all about it.
Trump knew Jayden's good. He did know that.
Correct. No.
When Harris showed up, he knew. He has said it a couple times. I know you have a really good quarterback over there. Yeah.
And so that's what I was going to say. In our second term here with Trump, I think he's actually kind of done a 180 on talking about sports and being involved here. And like I said, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. That makes life a little bit more fun, makes it seem a little bit more real life here. So I will say that I'm okay with that. I think we should have a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I agree. With that, the NBA Finals do begin tonight. I don't think this is going to be a great series. I think OKC is just a little too good. I think they would have won either way, either team. Like I think they needed to get a healthy Celtics team to have anybody get in their way of beating them. So I think Oklahoma City wins their first ever championship, and I think they're going to do it in like 5 games. I really actually don't think this is going to be an overly competitive series. As much as I've loved what Halliburton's been doing and Siakam and that team in general, but they're just too good for them. So give me talent wins. Give me Oklahoma City in 5.
I'm going to go OKC in 6 only because both of these teams try really hard every possession. Like, I think we're going to get some old school basketball here a little bit. Like, I think some elbows are going to get thrown. I think Indiana wins 1 on like a very close game that's chippy and physical. And then I'll give them one more game down the stretch, but I'm going to go OKC in 6 here. They also have the best player left in the playoffs too. Obviously, off of both teams, they have the best player. So
yeah, I thought I loved what Adam Silver said yesterday too, where, people were like, it's Indiana and Oklahoma City. Is there any concerns about that? And he goes, if the NFL had the Packers and Steelers in the Super Bowl, you'd celebrate it.
Right.
He's like, why are you saying this? Which I think is I think his goal of all of our cities and teams are important, just like in the NFL. All of our cities and teams are important. And I get it. Sometimes it's a bigger deal if the Knicks or Lakers are in it, but what's your point? And so I appreciated that, actually.
No, I think he's right, because you and I have this discussion all the time of there are certain teams that just are not important in this league. Here's 2 teams that have made themselves important.
Yes.
And that's exactly what's happened with this finals.
Yep. All right, everybody. All right, Callow, have a nice vacation. I will talk to you, Thursday next week?
Next Thursday.
All right. Me and you people for the next few days. Talk to you then. Brave Boy Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.